Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 2 of the anime series Mobile Suit Thunderbolt. And man, I just frickin' love this production. Once again, reiterating everything I said in my episode 1, discussion video covering this particular 4-episode series. I just love the 90s sort of style, the late 80s, early 90s anime style, and I guess late 90s as well, because there are aspects of it that really remind me of Cowboy Bebop. And there was one sequence in particular with the character of Daryl calling back on his past, and you see sort of a Christmassy backdrop. Reminded me of segments of the anime series Big O as well, which again was another series that kind of reminded me of Bebop, because Steve Bloom actually did the voice of the main character Roger, as well as the voice of Spike in Bebop and everything like that. I digress. I'm just chomping at the bit. I love this particular series for what it's worth. Largely are we seeing a sort of in-depth investigation of what makes Daryl who he is, how he's dealing with the prostheses that are being created by Dr. Carla. Very much answering, and I have to thank everybody who saw my episode 1 discussion video, and I was largely speculating because I didn't know what exactly they meant with the terminology they were using about, used body parts and sort of harvesting information out of those things, and all that stuff that was being referenced in episode 1 was actually explained to me fairly decently by a few of you guys in the comments, that, we were dealing with basically prosthetic limbs and attaching those things to the mobile suits, and that's exactly what we see on display in this episode. But I really loved calling back on Daryl's past, and if anybody in this series could really remind me of Spike, after sort of the melee that happens toward the opening of the episode, when he's got the bandage over his eye and he's lost one of his limbs, like when they close in on his face, I'm just thinking, man, he looks so much like Spike. And I loved that. It makes it that much more resounding to see sort of aspects that are familiar or similar, to other great classic anime series. And Gundam is a franchise of its own. I've spoken about how I'm only sort of cursorily familiar with a lot of the, ins and outs of the Gundam franchise and all of its many incarnations. And, but this is definitely a top favorite. I love it just a little bit more than the currently unfolding Iron-Blooded Orphans, which I'm covering episodically to coincide with this. But yeah, I mean, to get those insights into his past, being a child, being able to run free and roam free, and he's got to utilize this mechanization through, of course, the adaptability of his prosthetic limbs to control this, mobile suit and everything, and he's a sniper, and you've got EO just throwing down. He gets right up in their faces. And the whole thing that really shocked me was I thought he was meant to be the front runner of the actual attack. All along, no. EO is actually just sort of a decoy for his, more Brotherhood forces to come in later and try to lay the smacketh down, if you will. And that's interesting because he's getting lots of headway. He's taking out some of the, Zeon Living Dead division alongside Daryl. We're seeing, his friends and compatriots screaming out to him for help and do something, run, because they're backed into a corner by EO. And it was all just teeth-grittingly action-packed. Like, I didn't know which way this was going to go. I didn't know really who to root for, between these two guys, EO and Daryl, respectively. It's just tremendous. The influx of the music coinciding not only with the flashbacks to Daryl's past as he's experiencing and testing the limitations of this mobile suit before this melee actually unfolds with EO, sort of 50s rockabilly kind of music. It's very much in a different vein from the predominant sound from episode 1, the jazz, which does feature in this episode again as well as EO enters the fray. He is the jazz sort of aficionado. But I thought it was interesting. He's listening to a song, almost a ballad, that's very much in the vein of what Daryl is, during this reminiscence, if you will. And it's a song that EO is scathing toward. It's something that his own father apparently liked, whereas this is something very much in the here and now for Daryl, that type of music. And it calls back to very personal reminiscences for him of having the freedom of, like he goes through this sort of witnessing his own life before his eyes of being a child, running free, that Christmas backdrop at one point, getting that little handheld radio as a gift from his father, presumably his father. And we see this subsequently seemingly destroyed in the melee that ensues afterward. But even up to that point where he was a soldier storming a beach, and this is what led to the loss of his legs, and now he's lost effectively as a product of this melee with Io, his left arm. And what is really thoroughly kind of insane, I mean, I was taken aback. You basically have them going to the extent to make him a better, more lethal pilot, to give him the ability to sort of simpatico with the machinations of the mobile suit, which they armor up to hopefully go back into the fray and wipe the floor with Io and the More Brotherhood and everything like that. That opposing Earth, sort of Federation side. And it's really sort of insane because, you have Carla who's backed up into a wall. There was that deal between them. Find Jasmine, find Io, and take him down for everything he did, for who he killed and all that kind of stuff. And, she is just brought to the boiling point, having to be forced to remove an extra of his limbs just to make him the most lethal sort of, cutthroat pilot he can be in this mobile suit, because they need something that'll stand toe-to-toe with Io, with his Gundam suit, And what's interesting about that, too, is in the grand sort of melee that happened, the More Brotherhood, Captain Claudia, Io's lady, she's sort of rebounding from this with regret and remorse because they only took 2 of, Zeon's side out in this whole decoy, bait and switch scenario. And it's one of those things where you almost perceive some of the, underlings just under her in the chain of command. Maybe they're beginning to lack faith in her as a leader because she's really bogged down by the fact that she's had to send Io out there. This is her man and everything. And to have to be... it's like everybody's backed into a corner. For her to have to be backed into a corner to send Io out, even though he's loving it, even though, he almost had his life flash before his eyes. He was almost taken out by one of Daryl's shots. But that whole idea of that very personal vendetta going on between them, even though Io was very much the master of this particular melee, this particular battle, in the end. The end game is Daryl is now sort of, they're bionic manning him up with prosthetic limbs, not sort of bionic limbs by any stretch, but they are mechanized and they are going to be in cooperation with his mobile suit. And it already seems, toward the end of the episode, when he finally takes off in this sucker, he's speeding around. You see the lightning blast speed of his moving around to match what we saw in the early portion of the episode with Io's, Gundam. And so it looks much more like they are going to be well matched from here on out. And so that has me just riveted. It has me goosebumps induced. I'm just like, oh, hell yeah. I can't wait to see what the hell happens. And very much I love the gray area. It's something I keep coming back to with all the Gundam series I'm exposed to, and themes and stories. I mean, I feel for Daryl very much, and I'm I'm like Io for his just bombastic, devil-may-care nature, his sort of cocksuredness, in wanting to take these guys down and being able to, as effectively as he is, even though in the grand scheme of things it didn't amount to enough or as much as they hoped. He's still a badass pilot of this Gundam suit. And now that Daryl is fully souped up, now that he's ready to roll and he's got all that, sort of game fuel vengeance, having lost his limbs, having called back on his past, having now been confronted by Io twice and sort of had to be sent packing, he's out for blood. And so it's like, it's understandable and it's riveting, it's compelling as all hell. Thunderbolt, baby. Mobile Suit Thunderbolt. The fact that it's only 4 episodes, kind of criminal to me. But yeah, again, the animation, just exquisite. I mean, if you had shown this to me and said, hey, this came out in 1998, I'd be like, damn, holds up really well. You know, and it's coming out now, man, and it looks like a classic anime, but it's also got the heart and soul of great depth of story, intriguing characterization. They give you just enough to whet your appetite and then hold back a little bit, so you got to be there for the next one, man. And like, I'm totally grooving to that. I can't wait for the next one. I think it's coming out in March, as per the title at the end of this particular episode. Again, the music, I much more love the jazz than I do sort of the rockabilly 50s, pop music or whatever you want to call it, as on display in this episode, but it was still good. It very much spoke to who Daryl was and who he had grown up to be all through these trials and tribulations of his past. And just seeing the insight into his mind that this music is such a fuel for him, as the jazz is for Io. I mean, they are opposite ends of the spectrum in more ways than one, from their love of music to their vitality, piloting the mobile suits, to now being tricked out. Both of them, presumably, Io's Gundam will be fixed up, repaired, and sent out again. I mean, if Daryl encounters them and they haven't done any repairs, well, that's going to be almost a one-sided battle, I would think, with all of the machinations they put together for Daryl's, mobile suit. And, yeah, just bring on the next one, man. I cannot wait. Love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen episode 2 of Mobile Suit Thunderbolt, what you thought of it, if you've enjoyed it as much as I did, if you're much more familiar with the Gundam franchise overall, without posting spoilers or anything like that from source material or whatever. Any speculations are always welcome. Love having the conversation, and anything goes in the comments below. Our POVs can certainly disagree, so love it or hate it. I just love having the convo. If you loved this one expoundingly, tell me all about it. If it wasn't doing anything for you, if you prefer other Gundam series over this, let me know what and why and all that good stuff. And so yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.